Hi, my name is Molly Shortridge, and I am here to help you with your flute teaching techniques. I am a flutist and flute instructor in the area of central Pennsylvania, and I am the owner of the Perfect Fifth Musical Arts Center in Mechanicsburg. I teach us about 55 to 60 students a week, not only there, but also at a local high school 1 day a week where I also teach flute ensemble, and I teach at the Pollack Center for Performing Arts and State Street Academy of Music in Harrisburg. I also have a business called Kinderflute Academy where I run group classes and private lessons for kids ages 4 to 8. So I have a lot of experience starting beginners and find it really delightful and quite the puzzle a lot of times. So there's a lot of difficult situations sometimes, depending on who you get. And so I really enjoy the process of trying to figure out how to help each student learn to blow and how to hold the flute and just play in general. I also teach many older students and have had them gone on to music in college and the Marine Band and things like that. So, and I also have older adults. So that's a whole nother issue with some arthritis and things like that happen. So, yeah, I would love to help you just get a little better. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that flute is probably one of the ones that all the band directors say to me, how on earth do you teach so many different people and get these little kids to play? Because it's the hardest instrument for me to teach. And I've heard that over and over again. So I have to say that there's a lot of information out there on the web about how to play. What I do is generally gather information constantly, and a lot of times it's from trial and error with my students, not just what other teachers say. I also gather information from flute conventions and just my own knowledge of myself having gone through performance and in music therapy. Actually, I also did that, and that has helped me relate to people in a different way. So my ability to look at people and observe is kind of high, and then I'm able also to try to look outside the box and apply lots of ideas. I don't believe there's one way to do everything when it comes to the flute. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that flute teachers will say this is the way, and then another flute teacher will say this is the way. But I truly believe that it's different for every person based on the fact that we all have different mouths. We all have different physiology and size, our body sizes, and everything is just different. So we have to keep that in mind, that what works for one person may not work for everybody. So what I have in my head is a toolbox, and actually here's one right here. And in the toolbox, I have answers to some of the questions that I may say to myself when I'm teaching. Say, oh my goodness, this one student cannot get the high sound. What am I going to do? Their high sound is not coming out. So, oh yeah, maybe I should try this answer. I should have them blow to their elbow. Let's see if that works. Or, oh yeah, lift your soft palate. Maybe that would work for this student. Use the wind director. So we'll talk about that. Oh yeah, they should say E. That helps lift their soft palate instead of ah when they blow. Oh, don't forget their lower lip out. So I have lots and lots of ideas in my head, and that I try to use with each student if I'm having a difficult situation. Because it's not enough to just say, oh, you need to get your high notes out. You got to work harder. You have to give them the tools. And the tools to me are a long, long list of little tiny things that they need to adjust in order to think about it, to think about where their lips are, think about how to get the high note out. Another important aspect of getting a sound on the flute and getting good at it is to say, it was when they do it well, you need to say, wow, how did you do that? That to me is the best question. How did you do that? What did it feel like? Let's think about it. What did it feel like? And so that is going to help the child or person learn where it should go the next time when they're having trouble. So asking questions for the students is important, not just telling them. So here, I'm going to start just now here with getting the first sound on the flute and getting a sound with a complete beginner. After that, I'm going to discuss some issues that come up maybe with older students that have been playing for a while. So with sound production issues, the quality of the sound, and getting high notes out or low notes. I have issues with both when I get a new student in who might be in 9th or 10th grade. And after that, I'm going to discuss some posture issues that I see all the time with students coming in who have not had lessons yet. I also see posture issues with kids that have had lessons for years. So just knowing that when you send them home, that they don't always do what you tell them to do. So they can come back and have so many issues. So because they practiced in a funny position or something. So I'm going to discuss that too near the end. All right, so first things first, we're going to discuss how I teach students how to blow into the flute for the first time. So it's important that they first know what a good sound is. So I usually play them good sound versus bad sound samples on my own flute. I'll just sound terrible on purpose. Yeah, so when I talk about the squeaks, or what I call crunches is when they miss a note. That kind of sound I call a crunch. Some notes squeak high. Or you hear the, you hear that kind of sound. So I also give them many samples of good sounds so that they can identify good versus bad. With younger kids, I say, give me a thumbs up if it's good, thumbs down if it's bad, and we have fun. Older kids, they may or may not have fun with that as much. But what I also do with older kids is give them a list of flutists to listen to online that will help inspire them so that they're aware of what they're trying to go for. Many, many students who have played for years come in and have never heard of James Galway, Emmanuel Pahud. So I have a lot of students that have never heard flute, and so I think that's important. So we're going to start with the good sound versus bad sound, and then after I start with that, I do good mouth versus bad mouth. And first I teach them the word embouchure, but I also say, let's find sounds that are not, let's look for the mouth position that is not going to work. So I show them that the smile embouchure is not going to work. Or I show them that blowing out your birthday candles is not going to work. And I have them make all those faces so they know what they're not supposed to do. And they sometimes tuck in their lips. Well, that's not going to work. Little ones tend to do that more. I don't think my older ones, when I get a new beginner around 9 or 10, they may not do that as much. So I think age related. The ability for some students to have their brain connect to their lips is different. And so we have to keep that in mind. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the lip shape. So I did say that what you can't do, but what can you do is not go outside of your normal lip shape when you're at rest. So just keep it bored. Occasionally people say a little frown. I do that when I need to go flatter, so I don't want to go too far down or I'll be flat, personally for me. But yeah, a bored embouchure. And then I have students begin just simply by placing their finger under their lip and learning to say the word poo, poo, and then beginning to take out the voice. without stretching out their lips up here, you know, only making the center of their lip open up. So before I go too far in that, let me also mention that some students have very full bottom lips. In that case, I put the finger up a little higher, and thus the flute also goes up a little higher so that the air can reach into the hole of the flute. Some students have a natural divot. I put then the flute off to the side a little bit and tell them to focus their air. Try to feel the opening bursting open on this side while they're closing this side a little bit. So if you start them out right away like that, they can usually adjust to the fact that they might have a divot. Now that divot can split the airstream into two ways, so the air is going here. A lot of band directors and people have discouraged kids from playing, but that's not necessarily the case. They can really learn to go off to the side, and many professionals do as well. So just keep that in mind. That I have one student who's been difficult with her sound, and I've had so many talks with her because she's getting older and she has a huge divot, and she just wanted to play so bad and wanted to play nothing else, and I absolutely had to work with her so hard. And it really came down to maturity and her being able to feel it a little more. Meanwhile, we worked on rhythms, fingers, learning to play the songs without a good sound for quite a while. But as she matured, she was able to go for what she wanted. She was able to focus those lips a little more in the direction that I was trying to get her to go. And it took quite a few years. So that can be a struggle. We may not like the sound that they have for several years. We may be frustrated, but it doesn't mean that they don't love it still. She absolutely loves her flute. So one thing I did do was to get some oboe lessons to kind of make sure her lips are a little more together. So she did that. And she didn't like the oboe, and that's fine, because I know people tell these flutists with that divot to go just switch to oboe, which we do need more oboe, I know, but she just didn't like it and didn't want to do it, but she did just to help her, and it actually helped her flute sound, so she came back and played better. I should actually try piccolo on her. I think she would do better with that too. But we're getting there with her sound. So just to say that the placement of the finger and the placement of the flute will vary for each person. Just try to avoid the right side of if they have a divot, don't put the flute on the right side. There are posture reasons for that, because the flute comes out at an angle. Can't really show it here, but the flute will rest better on the left side, because we hold it at an angle from our bodies. So, okay, so I'm going to show you what I do next after I teach them to poof that. The next thing that I do is I have a big bucket of these in my studio. These are little balls of paper. And by the way, I got this idea from Kathy Blocky. The Blocky flute method is my favorite method. I've reviewed and done so many, but I keep going back to that because of its progressive nature and success. I mean, success with my students in that method like you wouldn't believe. But these balls of paper, I have them first blow one across the table with their flute lips, like that, and we try to see how far we can get it to go. So something like this. All right, so we start with that. After I do that with them, I might have them do a long row of them, and we'll do this many lessons just to get them to start sustaining their airstream. So there I just did 3 in a row. I have them bend down, make sure they can get in here and go like that. I add more and more, so eventually they're doing 15. They're almost running across the table to blow all of these in a row. So they're learning to sustain while starting with a sound. when we're at 15, by the way, that's 3 or 4 lessons later, I maybe do 3 in the first lesson. So the next thing that I would apply, after blowing a ball of paper and learning to go like this, I place this wind director on their lips. If you haven't seen one of these before, they're invented by Kathy Blocky of the Blocky Flute Method again, and they help give the students a visual of where their air is going. It helps the teacher tell the student where to blow so that the sound will come out on the flute. And there's so many uses for this. I use it all the way up to college and beyond if, I've had whatever adult students who want to use it. So the first thing I do is have them do this again. Okay, I place it on, do the same thing. I want them to first get the yellow fan, and then after they get the yellow fan, I start to have them direct their top lip down so they can get the blue, and then the green. So in particular for a high note, if you just blow really loud right here on the yellow fan, you're going to go really sharp. So I have them direct the air down so it gets richer and fuller, and try to get the green with their top lip. I think I went a little too far. I was talking about high notes already, but because there's other things to say about high notes for sure. But I want the students to start being flexible right away. So we start trying to get the yellow, blue, green, and the red is a danger. So if you buy one of these now and you get a colored one, the red is on a different one. I move it up, I change it, because I like red is danger. Oh, by the way, this should be parallel. So there's a little disc here, and you could put a penny on it. It was originally meant for that, but it's very distracting to drop the penny all the time. So a gummy bear that's sticky, a little bit sticky, you can smush it on there, and then keep the gummy bear parallel to the floor so that students are not dipping this down too low or like that to get the fans. You want them to hold it steady. Okay, so as soon as they blow a fan really fast and can get it going for a little bit of a time, I have them switch immediately to the head joint, which I hold up. I place it for them. I don't let them place it because I want them to be placing it where they should feel the exact spot and they can memorize that. So I place it and say, do you feel where that ledge is? Can you feel that right there? Can you feel that? I make sure I ask questions. Okay, pretend that you had the fan now. So I would say probably 97% of my students get the sound on the first day of lessons. I've had problem students come in from band. The band director's like, I can't get them to get a sound, and I can get them to get the sound using this method. Sometimes there are some kids with really big issues with feeling their lips. So that, or kinesthetic abilities are a little behind. So it's a little harder for occasional kids. Back and forth, we do the wind director over and over. I do a lot of things on the wind director in between blowing on the head joint. If they get frustrated, we switch back to this and we do rhythms. If they get frustrated with this, we go back and do more blowing. I also will have them learn to sing and play. Maybe not the first lesson, but about 4 or 5 lessons in, I teach them to sing and play, where they learn to and close their lips to a flute embouchure. Then I see if they can keep the airspeed going while they're making it noise. If they can do that, then they're ready to do it on the head joint. So singing and playing is essential for creating a vibrant, full sound. And a lot of my students who are high that go on to college, they are doing their scales, singing and playing every day so that their sound gets more full, more vibrant. And it helps with their air supply because it uses so much air to do that. So they're building their air right from the beginning. So a couple other things to do on the wind director and the head joint is to beatbox. So I just did some chas. I can do some and then right away on the head joint. So rhythms, singing and playing, all that stuff should be done on the head joint before, so that they help develop their air and their speed. Some kids have more issues with holding things and they just wobble all over the place. In that case, sometimes these things that we do cause them to wiggle even more. So wiggling, we don't want. Flutes have to stay very, very strong. So if you're finding that some of those things do cause wiggling issues, you may want to just go back to basics. So you can also teach them to flutter tongue right away. You could teach them to, you could have them imitate you. So many things on the head joint to help develop their sound. Once their sound's fully developed, they can put it into the flute. If students have a curved head joint, I start them on a straight. I have tons of these sitting in my studio, so I start them on a straight one. It's easier to hold, and I just wrap it up in a towel and send it home in a bag. And the curved head joint's a little harder to hold when they're first learning to blow. But they must have it in the flute when they're starting to blow into the flute. Oh, I forgot one thing that we teach is right away is, and like I said, lip flexibility. I also teach that on the head joint right away. There's a couple different ways to get out high and low sounds. Some students naturally get the high sound right away, so that's okay. You'll hear that a lot. Try to sustain it. Try to get them to sustain it a long time to build the strength up in their lips. And I also then will try to drop their sound. So I show them two things. One is I take a Post-it note and wrap it around a pencil and make an opening about that size. That's about 2.5 centimeters. Put it in their mouth. I'm trying to open their lips just a little bit more for the low notes. And some people have a very tight mouth right from the start. If they have a very open mouth right from the start, then I use this. The flat drinking straw has to be not the round kind that you find more often in the grocery store. So this is from Amazon, and Kathy Blocky also has a bunch of these on her web. Well, I don't know if on her website, but if you write to her, she has them, thousands of them for sale. So those I use to help with high notes, to tell the difference between high and low. I tell students right away a lot of different. Now here's where my toolbox comes in. First, I teach them warm air, cool air, blow on your hands. Okay, that's the feeling in the back of your throat for a low note. That's warm air. I teach them cool air is soup. Blow on soup, cool it down. There's high air. Cool air for high notes. And I teach them ah versus E. Say ah for your low note. E will help their high note. Also lifts up their soft palate a little bit. And the main thing I teach is lip flexibility, is moving the lips slightly in and out. People go overboard, but the student has to find where it is. They can do it fine with the wind director. A low note, you might try for the blue fan with a wide opening. And a higher note, you might try to bring your lip out a little so you can reach the yellow fan with a smaller opening. So I have them low. And a lot of times I try to get them to be lighter on the high notes. So we're doing a real rich low note. We're just like, oh, and then bring your lip out. and just gently bring your airstream up until you spin the yellow fan. So that when you're playing the flute, you're not going doing that. You're not overblowing. I want them to find it with their lip. So you'll notice my lip goes crooked, by the way. So just so you know, I am not a straight embouchure person, and that's okay. And as long as you get a big full sound, and that's where it landed probably when I was a teenager, and it's been there ever since. And I have never had a teacher say I should change it. So anyway, I actually naturally had a very full sound, and I didn't have to think about it at all when I was younger. I did have to think about getting softer though. So some of those things I had to really work on, and I can implement. I'll teach you a little bit when I get further into the high note versus low note section. I'm still in the beginner phase, by the way. So let me go back to beginners. When you have a good sound on the head joint, and then you can put this into the flute. I generally start this, if it's a very strong kinesthetic learner, they can often get this the second lesson. We can put this in. Occasionally there's somebody really young or somebody that just can't feel things as easily. Then I wait, it's 4 weeks sometimes till we do put this in. So they gravitate, when they start blowing with some notes and learning their notes, they gravitate to a ha instead of a puh. But I initially try to get them to do just like they did a puh on their head joint and their wind director, so that it's successful, because they need a lot of air bursting, a lot of fast air to get enough to go through the flute. If they are not getting that sound at all, we go back to the head joint a little bit longer, because they have to have enough air support to push through the flute. And again, here's the hugest issue, is the positioning. So the student's already starting to drop it, and that's just horrible for them, because they're holding it, and what they thought they could blow, now they're going like this. Flute's crooked, or flute's up to, some just go up here, some go here. So the first thing I have to teach them is, almost before we even try blowing, is how to hold it with the three contact points. And that, they are so anxious to play that it's hard to get them to not do that, to actually stop and want to work on how to hold it. But you can have them try to balance the flute over a couch a little bit, just kind of, can you hold that flute and wiggle your fingers? The three contact points are the thumb, and this part of your finger here, and your lips. So they forget that the lips are holding your flute up. Your mouth is a little bit. You have it here. Now, the hugest issue, and I have this with older students, they come in, the flute is rolling all over the place, especially back, because they're holding up the flute. This is the heaviest part of well, I don't know if I can show you that. This is with the rods. That's the heaviest part of the flute. And the flute is round. So if the thumb is under the flute, it's going to naturally just fall backwards. So every time I hold it and let go, it goes that way. That is why students get a really thin, horrible sound right from the beginning, or they come in for years having played like this. They will never get a full sound, and they will be very flat, just very flat. And it may not be an air issue. It is positioning. It's mainly positioning of the thumb. I'm not on the positioning section yet, but this will overlap, because beginners have to be taught how to hold the flute correctly from the beginning. The thumb's role is, if you see that thumb way under there, These fingers are going to be like that. And we need to pull the thumb back. I like it on the back of the flute here, pushing the flute forward into the lips. So you almost don't see it here, right? So push it forward into the lips. Then what I have students do, wiggle. Can you wiggle your fingers and keep the flute steady, pressing the flute forward? And this is, by the way, the reason that if they have an off-center embouchure, we want to go to the left side. You can't push the flute forward this way. It's over here. So I try to teach that. I try to teach the pinky is not holding the flute down. Don't squeeze with your pinky. So get that pinky to wiggle and hold the flute for a little while. You can put the pinky on then and see if you can gently put it down. This all affects the sound. So once they can hold the flute fairly steady, they might get their first note. Band methods often start with D, then E flat, and then F. I think, from what I've seen, they are some of the harder notes to get right off from the beginning because you have more fingers down. It's a little more resistance to get air through the flute. The easiest note is B. It's just kind of a big open sound, easy to get. And here's the thing with the D and the E flat and the F, they're doing a lot of back and forth with these hands right away. Well, the flute's going to start to wiggle. They're going to start to feel, I'm going to drop it. So I usually start beginners with B, A, and G. So sometimes I have them hold the flute down here. And we're just going. And then we might gravitate the thumb up and try it. All right, now, one other thing I didn't mention is the thumb port. So I use this almost with all beginners, and many students that come in get one because their thumb is way out of position, and no matter how many weeks I tell them to stop holding their flute with their thumb, and that's creating a lot of tension because they don't want it to roll, so they're grabbing and squeezing. They need to balance their flute by pushing it forward. The thumb port, and I don't like the Bo-Pep. If you've ever seen the Bo-Pep, it has scratched so many flutes, so it's terrible. And it doesn't have a shelf on it. This one has a little shelf. And you put it under there, under the F key. And so that is a great option for beginners to have their flute very stable. I've had even kids, I had one that got into district band 3 years in a row, and then her senior year she said, let me try one of those. And I put it on her flute and she goes, oh, I can go some, I feel like I'm freer. And I said, yeah. And actually I did not use one until I met the inventor I was teaching a flute class with Kathy Blocky a few summers ago, and the inventor of this came and gave me one. And I said, well, I sell these. And he's like, yeah, but take it anyway. And this one has a cutout in it. When I put it on my flute and played, I thought it sounded better. I was like, what? My flute sounds more vibrant. And he said, yeah, he's not marketing that, but he thinks so too, because your thumb is not deadening the flute as much. There's ones without holes, the first thumb port that came out, but this one made a difference on my sound. So I started using it. And now I like the feeling. I almost do feel my flute slipping around when I'm not using it. So I went years without using one. And there's people that say, don't use this thing, it's terrible. I'm like, I don't think so. I think my opinion is I like it. So I've also had kids go all the way, through college. These are on their flute. But back to this, positioning the beginner, the B, A, and G, very solid. You can really work on a solid sound when they start with those 3 notes. And they do lots and lots of B, A, G songs. So it's pretty good 3 notes to work with for quite a while. I do those maybe 6 weeks or so into flute playing. Some kids need extra, so I find more songs that have, or rate some with them. Just want to speak a little bit about the tonguing that happens when kids are beginning on the flute. So it's very important that we don't push it right away. The sound has to be full. So I need them to be able to just to play their songs with a huff. I want them to be flexible too with their lips. I just did those with haws just to show you. I want them to be very flexible up there. And then we add the tongue with the wind director. And then I start having them learn to tongue. If they are doing, if later in life that they're having trouble getting out a nice, less thuddy tongue, because sometimes it's ta, ta, you hear a real strong one, then I have them do French tonguing, which is the tongue comes out a little further and we go, it's more like a th sound, like the tongue is hitting, when I do it, I'm almost touching the bottom of my top lip. So the sound is a little cleaner and brighter, especially when double tonguing. And the French have amazing tonguing, so it's the way the French tongue, and we do English tonguing naturally. Some books you may find say spit out a piece of rice to start their sound production, and that is the French tonguing. But then they go ahead and say, oh, ta, use ta for tonguing. So they kind of contradict that at first. So be aware what you're teaching when you're tonguing. You know, teaching English tonguing. Ta, if you say ta. When that happens, and they're saying ta, the first thing that happens is a student who may be blowing down here and able to get low notes really well only goes up to high notes then. Because when you tongue, the airstream goes higher. It shoots it up higher. So using this is a good visual to try to get the low notes back out again. So we're trying to tongue, and we're trying to get a low note again. Keep the mouth wider open. Okay, so the tonguing is important to teach for a lot of songs that need to come up, but it also causes quite a lot of stress in the students right away. And so another thing that will happen when they tongue is they start doing short little notes, and then instead of, they're not connecting their notes. So I teach that with the wind director too. Okay, here we go. We got a tongue 5 in a row. You did it in one breath. So they did 5 tongues or 4 tongues, whatever they can do. And then do it on the head joint. Make sure they can go. And you could roll the dice and have them do whatever it says on the dice, make it a board game where they have to tongue so many times. That is a huge issue, is the short little notes that happen, and trying to teach kids to sustain the airstream while they're tonguing. So another thing I do is I draw this on a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and I'm going to try to do this. I have them, I'll just have to describe it without the flute. I have them blow, so they go two. That's easy, right? So, but then I make little notches on this. There, there, and there. And then I have them, whenever I'm going to have them take a big breath and they have to start blowing, and I'm going to go like this. And when I touch that notch, they have to tongue. So they're going to go 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So when that happens, that is amazing, because then we can transfer it right over to a song. You might find when they change fingerings, though, it goes back to the old. So in that case, then I might have them do this on their scale. So we'll write the G, A, B, C, D, or we do 2 notes, A, B, A, B. So they learn to tongue and move their fingers at the same time. 2, 2, 2, to transfer it instantly over to the flute on a piece of music so that they can see that it has to happen in their music. All right, so I think I covered everything in the beginning section about learning to blow on the flute, except I wanted to say that for young kids, they may need a curved flute. If they're 10 years old, sometimes they still do. They're little, and they don't want to be like feeling like this, and so, you know, or they're putting this here too much. So curved flutes can fix that if they're really small, and I think we need to advocate for those a little bit more. Also, you could put a stuffed animal on their head, or a Dixie cup, or make a birthday party hat that they have to hold on and not drop it while they're playing so that they stop going over here. You could have contests with everybody in the class. I still think I covered everything, so probably going to go right to some other sound issues that happen. What else do I do with the wind director? This, I use, students put it in their flute, here, like this, if they're having big sound issues and they are just not sounding good. Every time they pick up their flute, we blow 5 minutes into this as a warm-up. We do their scales, we do their 5-note patterns, we do their songs on the wind director. I have them try to aim high or low, depending if they're going high notes or low notes. If they're going up to high, I have them lift their jaw out. We blow and play our songs on that. And then we put the head joint on, and the sound is often very different. And sometimes they do not realize that they are not using enough air in the flute at all. So this will show them. They get very tired doing this, and that's because they're not using enough air in their flute, and they need to. So I'll tell them, do you use that much air? I'll ask them that, and they'll say no. I'll say, well, there's your problem. You need to use more air. Then I also teach on that singing and playing, like I said before, and also double tonguing, and or if we're doing thugga thugga because it's French tonguing, or dugga dugga. You still want the fans to spin, so when students learn to double tongue, they are not usually, they're going to hold back their air. So we go back and forth with this, then we go back on to their exercises with the flute. Pretend the fan is there. I always say, pretend the fan is still there. And then they usually do a little better with their double tonguing, but they need to have one at home and also practice it that way. Oh, yeah, harmonics right away. Let me talk about harmonics real quick. So I started right at the very beginning of lessons. They will do low and high, maybe not the very first lesson, probably the second, definitely the third. So that is something of 25 years ago or so. Books did not advocate going high yet. Everything should stay down low. I know Trevor Wise has stayed down low, get the richness. I do that if there's a huge issue and somebody cannot get up high, just simply can't, no matter what we keep trying. Sometimes it's a flute, by the way. I know certain brands that students came in with, and when I switched them, they were like, whoa, able to get everything. So it's not necessarily the student, but lots of times it is. So Kathy Blocky is the first method book writer who said, we can jump right away. So my students will learn to jump on their songs. If they learn Hot Cross Buns, then immediately, we're going to learn to do it up high. And then we're also going to, if we learn all that, and that's fine, and we go on to other songs, I give them a jumping song each week of one of their old songs and say, you must jump on this one. So they have to go. So they're learning to move their lips in and out a little bit. Harmonics are great for that. I teach students to finger the low D for pretty soon into their flute lessons. So finger the low D. can get pretty high up right away. They do need a model. They need to hear me so they can match me, and they need to go back down again so they learn to open up the inside of their mouth a little for the lower notes, more like that. And then, as they go low, they need to learn to drop it as well. I have older students coming to me that have done harmonics in band, and they don't know why. They're just like, I don't know, we just do them. And I'll say, well, you have to know the purpose for everything you're doing. Everything you are doing has a purpose. So if you don't know why, ask your band director. He would know. But I also think that harmonics are essential for teaching students how to play soft up high. So one of the kids really come to me almost every time, just the A above their staff, they're still having trouble getting out, like an 8th grader or 9th grader who hasn't had lessons. They're up there on the high D and they're just blasting. So I have to teach them, your lip has to really move in and out, and we're going to do it as soft as possible. So you can be loud on your low note, but let's get soft on the high. Or we do the harmonics and get softer as we go up. So that's essential for them. And that's not always actually one of the first things when I get an older student in is that the sound is not full and rich. So I do teach a few things to help with that, and I'll talk about that in a second. So it's not full and rich down low, but it's screechy and loud up high. So there's the biggest issue with sound sometimes. Or they just don't simply get their high notes out very well. So yeah, I'm going to get to that in a second. But I just wanted to say real quick that this is a great diagnostic tool for you. If you're a band director and your student is coming in with just simply not able to blow one of these fans, and you put it up to them, and you're seeing that, then they're blowing off in the wrong direction. So this can train them, and it can diagnose. It can also diagnose for you, are they using enough air? I usually get this. Oh, that's why you're not getting a sound. So you're just not using air. So essential just to have one in your room, and I love them. So you can also have students use these in auditions. I've had students at district band auditions put this in their flute, and they're just blowing and warming up on this in the hallway, or before college auditions when they can't make a lot of noise, or in a room, in a hotel room when they need to blow, and yet they can't, it's late, they can't blow into their head joint. So, okay, so the rich full sound, I posted a link to, I sent along in the competency packet. It's Jen Clough's website, has great low tone exercises. Actually, all the tone exercises in there, there's like 20 some pages if you go to the low tone section, and then there's a high tone section as well. But the very first essential low full sound exercise I do for students is basically Moyse daily exercises that I did in college. But you basically, in Moyse's daily exercises, you do 2 notes chromatically down a step, getting softer. But I have my students get louder, as per the Jen Clough website has it written out, where you just go. So I have them push and push and push and get a real big full sound. I teach them to bring their top lip over and down into the flute. Then they do that twice. And I do it so they match me. We have a contest, can you get louder than me? And so a lot of students are afraid sometimes to be loud. That seems to me sometimes a little bit of, they want to be in control of everything. They want it so soft so that they can be in control. And I found that with, it doesn't make sense in a way, but it does, because they just, they don't want people to know they're out of control, I think, and make wrong notes and hear it. So I think it's sort of a little bit of a control issue sometimes when students come in with real little sounds and they're older and they have big lungs and they do running and they do everything. But anyway, back to that exercise. I have them do those twice and I say to them, there's always a better. You get the first sound good? Yay, that was awesome. You know what? There's always a better. Let's see if we can get it even better. Then we go down a step. Oh, I just got soft accidentally. So the Moyes daily exercises, I don't teach them until they're more developed with their big full sound. Moyes, the actual Moyes exercise is like I teach them to fade that, real soft. But they are not able to do that yet till they learn harmonics a little bit more, and they have to get that full sound. So, okay, another great thing for getting a full sound is to show kids, even if they don't have braces, there is a great braces YouTube link out there on how to play with braces, and the woman on it talks about rabbit and roll. So pretend you're like a rabbit and get your teeth out and roll your top lip over the teeth. And so pressing down into the flute makes it richer. So sometimes that instantly helps. Sometimes I have students blow to their elbow. That helps sometimes to their shoulder. Sometimes down this side of their flute. We try to get them to visualize their airstream going different directions. Sometimes up over the soft palate and into the flute. Another thing I might do is have them imagine they're getting a really hard time still with the fan. Or with the high note, I'm sorry. They're really having a hard time. Where did I put my little... well, I can't find this, but remember that pretend this is my straw. I have them blow through a straw into a mirror and then pull it out and try to retain the shape. I just had them draw pictures in the mirror, so they're... and then we sometimes put that straw in their mouth, and I pull it out while they start to blow so that they're able to retain the high note embouchure that they need to have. Here's another real quick exercise to help with high notes. Play a high F, but miss it. So on purpose have them miss it. But then have them take a big breath and slowly bring their jaw out till they start to hear it very softly. I had them do this over and over. It's actually a slower process than that, and sometimes they try to go this way. They immediately do that, but I want them to start to try to find that very beginning of a soft note, and that will help, because we don't want them playing music and going, we don't want that. We don't want, yeah, so we don't want that blasty stuff. All right, so I think that's it for the stuff that I wanted to teach you about a good sound. It's really hard to do this in 1 hour. I have so many things, but I also wanted to talk about posture and tuning, and I'm almost out of time. So real quick, since we're on sound and tuning, the flute should be out 5 millimeters. It's where it's factory tuned. Cold room, hot room might change it a bit, but that's basically it. So, and it's 442, so I tune my students to that on the new instruments are 442. So that's what they tune to, because I don't want 440. Many of my students come in from band, they were told to keep pulling it out and pulling it out. but I think that's because their high notes are really screechy and they don't know how to bring them down with their mouth. The mouth, its job is to learn to be flexible so you can tune. They can practice pitch bends. So if you have an A, I did that pretty terribly, but I teach them to do this to go flatter. I went overkill there, but and I tell them to bring their lower lip out, and they're more like they're blowing bubbles underwater to get the pitch up if they need to. So you go flat. So that was all with my mouth and not really the head joint at all. I mean, definitely not the head joint. So it's easier to teach them on low notes first, of course, and actually I'm better at it right now. So I'm like, anyway, they can't be tense. It's the enemy. It will not work for a good flute sound at all. And now the other way that I want to talk to you a little bit about is posture and how that makes a huge difference in their playing for sure. I had a student in 11th grade coming into me, and she had a great sound. And then mid-year, she started sounding terrible. I was like, no, I didn't say that. I'm not like that. You know, like, what happened to your sound? Like, what's going on? It turned out that she was like this. I was standing over here, so I didn't actually notice for the first couple lessons. I'm like, something is going on. And then I looked at her really a little more and noticed that her flute had altered up to here. It's because she was in a pit orchestra and she got stuck. She got in. So then marching band also does that. Kids are going to be pulling back here, which creates some really bad hand issues, some shoulder issues, some tension here. And it also messes up their sound. So yeah, they have to be in marching band. It's going to make them really motivated and they love it. So you can't take that away from them, but the marching band posture is not good for them. So I have to over-teach them that you've got to, no matter where, whenever you're playing somewhere else, you've got to get back in your regular position. So kids have to be in the exact same position every time they play. They have to realize they cannot move, but they can move. So that's really strange, but you don't want tension where they're like, they have to learn to move within a good framework of the best posture. And they can float. They can float and they can dip. But they cannot be pulled back and they can't be like this and they can't be like this. So if they're sitting in the band room with their friends and they're putting their flute over their head, it's just really never going to get a good sound. So the flute has to be in the same spot every time they play in relation to their body. The head joint has to be in the same spot. So to the best sound, find the best sound on the head joint for each student. Best, fullest sound is usually pretty parallel to the floor, the hole, and lined up with the keys usually, just about, sometimes inward slightly. And then mark it with 2 dots of nail polish. Because if you do that, then it's never going to change. The lineup of the hole to the rest of the flute will never change. That is one variable you take out. Because if it's out a little bit one day and in another day, they keep mixing up their lips. So we just don't want to keep doing that. So when they're sitting on a chair, they should be sitting on the corner. So when they put their flute up, they're facing their music because they don't play like this. Flutists play, they'll be here naturally if the stand is in front of them. And I'll show you that with a wall real quick. If I'm here against this wall, and see, I'm in my bare feet. But anyway, if the kids put their flute parallel to this wall, you will instantly feel a whole lot of tension right here. And that tension radiates up to their arms, their fingers, their lips. It causes all kinds of havoc. So we naturally position in a pie shape from the wall in order not to feel any tension. So if their back is to the wall, and they are back like this is kind of marching band posture, I believe, where the flute is parallel. I already feel tension here, it hurts. I'm going to push it here. So then where does the stand need to go? The stand needs to go catty corner from the student. So I think all students need to be aware that their stand they have to be at 130 around there, and so that when they bring their flute up, the stand's here. So band rooms can be positioned in a way to help students alleviate any tension in their bodies, because that tension radiates to the fingers and gives a terrible sound as well. So that's that. Now we have also a couple other issues I'm going to cover really fast. The thumb, the hugest issue. So I already talked about that and how that rolls around. You can't get a good sound unless the flute is firm on the lip. My teacher in college, he was the Philadelphia associate principal, used to sneak up behind me and try to push my flute off my lip. My next teacher after that wanted it strong. So there's two different opinions. And I now found with most of my kids, stronger is better. If they need to get soft and bring their lip out, maybe not like iron grip. They need to be able to have some flex. The flute needs to be a little lighter on the lip, but then they've established their good sound. So, okay, foot joint. I sometimes get students in foot joint here. That's going to create so much tension because then their pinky is stretching to reach it, and then these fingers slide off these. And you often find students like that with these. So that could be a foot joint issue. It could be the thumb issue. If the thumb is under too far, the fingers go here. So we need the fingers to lightly be above the flute, just like that. This position depends, yeah, I put mine pretty much in the middle of this ball here in the middle of the key, but if somebody has really long fingers, they do move it here. And that's where some people may have disagreements. So, and some people may need to move it down a little bit more. I've moved some of my students so that they can reach their low C and their B if they're really small. So that foot joint can change. If they have tension in their pinky, teach them to trill. If they have finger position problems, teach them to trill. They've got to learn to trill right over the key and with a loose, have them do this. They're just right above the flute and they're wiggling. They need to do it when they watch TV. We just want to some of the flutes have very hard tension in the pinky too. It's hard to press down, so that can be an issue. So I look for flutes that are not that way for my students. But let me just check and see, because I know we're out of time. I don't want to take all your time watching this video. So yeah, I got the 3 points of contact. They're still going to do that. Oh, hypermobilization of fingers. It's when they dent in their fingers and you see them bending. They're pressing, again, trill exercises. I've used tape around the joints of their fingers. I just take some Scotch tape and wrap it here into position so they can learn to feel it. They have to do it at home though and play that way a little bit. If there's huge issues, I've had like a senior or a junior, they actually get, I had a ballet student who was extremely flexible. Well, she just couldn't bring her fingers into that nice curve that you need. And so she got, from the occupational therapy website, some splints that you can get designed just for your size. Okay, I froze up for a second. Let me just finish up real quick with any last things about... Yeah, the thumb port can also help relax those fingers, the thumb port. So I just found that they're not gripping the flute as much. I think that's all I have for let me just make sure. Left-hand fingers, if the fingers are lacking flexibility, maybe placement is incorrect. Their wrist might be tucked under too much, so you have to make sure that it's lined up pretty well and not like under here. Yeah, so I think that's everything. And I also had a whole outline about the repertoire that I love that I think is really essential for students. I also have some ideas for things that come into me that are old-fashioned ways of teaching that really aren't as effective and that flutists don't always love. But some of those things are like the kiss and roll technique, or smiling embouchure is still taught sometimes. So some of those things come to me, and I have an outline about that. So if you have questions in the class, we'll talk. If you have questions, what I put on there, if you need to know, or I could send you the outline. Okay, but I wish you the best, and thank you all. So we'll see you in class.